Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is July 30th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. The main topic of today's episode is going to talk about this evening's debate with the Democratic Party's contenders for the presidency for the upcoming 2020 presidential election. Of course, this is part one of a two-part series because we still have about 20 or so candidates. Now, this number is going to dwindle, and it will dwindle quickly over the coming months, as these candidates are going to run out of money on the periphery. They're going to not gain enough traction to have enough polling position, high enough numbers in the polls to make it onto the debate stage. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to drop out, but that's most likely what's going to happen. If they can't get TV and camera time and air time, then their bid for winning the nomination is next to nil. So we're going to talk about that because that's the news. But before that, we are still in the midst of a major week of economic news. So we're going to kickstart the podcast talking about those numbers. And then again, we're going to get into the Democratic debate. So the S&P was down 8 points. The Dow lost 23. The NASDAQ lost 20 points. The Russell 2000 gained 16.5 points, representing a gain of 1%. Now, these stocks were down a lot lower. The Russell 2000 started in negative territory, was down, I believe, at the low about 9 or 10 points. So it did a 26-point swing. So basically, it was a 2-point swing throughout the day's session. That's quite the move. And of course, this is fitting with our volatility model that we've been talking about and are anticipating more moves up plus 1% or less than 1%. So we're going to keep you posted on that because, again, the model's simple, but it's been predictive, and it appears to be working as we make our way through these markets day by day. Now, again, the major indices were relatively flat, even though earlier this morning they were down on news because Thunder Thumbs, Twitter in chief, Donald Trump, took to Twitter and was talking about the U.S.-China trade talks. And now, we're in no hurry, and China is just not living up to the deal. They always back away. They always want what's best for them. And so it just put a sour mood in the markets early this morning. But of course, the markets were still able to rally off of those lows. Oil also rallied today, gaining about 2% based off of inventory drawdowns that were larger than expected this time. So we have WTI trading at $58 a barrel. Brent is now trading at $65 and change per barrel. Gold has been consolidating over these past few days, waiting on the news from the Federal Reserve, which is going to come out tomorrow afternoon. So gold is trading at $1,441 an ounce. Silver is trading at $16.51 an ounce. Now, again, for those of you who may be joining for the first time, I do not give financial advice here. I give the news, I give my analysis, I give my opinion. But there is a universal rule in investing: buy low, sell high. I happen to be of the opinion that both of these precious metals are undervalued, especially if we are going to have central banks the world over begin another easing cycle, which is what I am anticipating is going to be the case. This is not likely to be a one-and-done interest rate cut and then we're going to all go home. No. This is going to be the start of a new easing cycle, and dare I even say that other central banks, including our own, the Federal Reserve, are likely to embark on future rounds of quantitative easing, and they may start to call it something else. They're going to need a new PR campaign, so they might call it something else, but it is going to be the same inflationary, fraudulent, flawed economic policy, market down. The U.S. 10-year Treasury, again relatively flat, waiting to see what happens with the Federal Reserve, is continuing to yield 2.06%, so little change from yesterday's podcast. The VIX, the volatility index, gained about 9 percentage points on the day and is now trading at $13.94. Around the world here with some quick headlines before we get to our analysis and discussion of the Democrats' debate. So, news from China. Chinese manufacturing shrinks for the third month. The official NBS manufacturing PMI in China rose to 49.7 in July from 49.4 in June, compared to market expectations of 49.6. This marked the third straight month of declines in factory activity, underlining the need for more stimulus from the government to support the economy. New orders, export sales, and employment all declined at softer rates, while output expanded at the most in 3 months. Now, again, folks, this number, 49.7, is below that threshold of 50. Okay? If you're above 50, you're talking about expansion. If you're below 50, you're talking about contraction. Does this sound like good news? It's not good news. This is a global economy that is slowing down. It is hitting China. It's hitting every country on this planet. You can't go on these debt binges. You can't go on these money printing sprees and expect nothing bad to happen. Okay? Australia, because we were talking about their inflation expectations the other day. Second quarter inflation from the land down under is stronger than expected. We have a reading of 1.6. The market was anticipating 1.5, still well below their target of 2 to 3%. Australia looks for 2 to 3%, so they're still well below it. And the Australian dollar, as of late, has been taking quite a big hit. Other news out of China. China services growth slows to an 8-month low. However, it is still in expansion territory, reading above 50. New Zealand, because we've been talking about New Zealand, because they're embarking on interest rate cuts as well. New Zealand business sentiment hits an 11th-month low. Now, that's quite shocking, isn't it? Because we've been talking here on the Capital News podcast about the Royal Bank of New Zealand cutting their interest rates and having their respective stock market make all-time highs, almost on a daily basis. But nevertheless, we have New Zealand business sentiment hitting an 11-month low. Interesting, isn't it? So it's anybody's guess as to how the markets are going to respond to further monetary stimulus. Could there be a melt-up scenario? Could you have a stock market that continues to make all-time highs? Sure. You could also have markets declining. You have Australia embarking on easy policy. You have New Zealand embarking on easy policy. And you have those respective stock markets making all-time highs or nearing all-time highs or getting back to recent all-time highs. Conversely, if you look at Europe today, they got decimated today. You had the English stock markets down 0.5% today. You had the German exchanges down over 2% today. You had the French markets down nearly 2%. And so were the Spanish markets, down 2.5%. So what's going on? Because you have the ECB ready to prime the press, go even further into negative interest rate territory, and embark on their quantitative easing measures. Yet you have their stock markets plummeting. Now, again, one day does not make a trend, but what's going on here, folks? Isn't this supposed to be the panacea? Isn't easy money supposed to make everything better? Because once again, we have Donald Trump coming out saying we need a 100 basis point cut tomorrow. Not 25, not 50, 100 basis points. That's 1 full percentage point in interest rate cuts. And he says if they did it, the Dow Jones Industrial Average would hit 30,000 points. This is an obsession with the stock market. Where it's coming from, I don't know. Is he personally benefiting from this? This is an abuse of power, ladies and gentlemen. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you support Donald Trump, you probably don't think there's anything wrong with it. However, had this been President Obama saying this stuff, and if President Obama were obsessed with the stock market and trying to talk it up, I guarantee you most Republicans and conservatives would say, what is this? See, we told you he's a financial dictator. We told you he's a socialist trying to control the markets. It's not his job to do that. But it's your guy. If you voted for Trump, you're probably fine with it. I voted for Trump. I'm not fine with it. It's an abuse of power. He knows what he's doing. Is he benefiting? Is his family benefiting? Are friends of his benefiting? Are friends of his benefiting from this? Do they know what he's going to tweet? To the good or to the bad? Because markets rally and sell off with whatever this president says. That's too much power. It's too much power in one individual. We rail against this here all the time. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, anything else. I don't like it coming from the president. I don't like it coming from other prime ministers. I don't like it coming from central bankers. I'm consistent. I'm on the side of the truth. I'm on the side of free market capitalism. Not Republican, not Democrat, not the swamp. I'm here for the average American. So that's a lot of news that we just covered there quickly. Some headlines with the economy. Tomorrow is going to be, it's going to be an earth-shattering day. What are these 12 idiots going to say tomorrow, with Jerome Powell being the mouthpiece for the Federal Reserve? Stay tuned. Now, to the political front. The Democrats, we had about 10 Democrats on the stage giving a debate that was hosted by CNN. I have to say, CNN, I think, did a pretty good job. There was not a lot of interruptions. They kept and this is true to the candidates, too. You have to give credit where credit's due. The candidates, they stuck to the rules. They didn't talk over each other, which is so annoying because you just can't hear anything. Then it just becomes an hour or two of bickering and nothing gets solved. Not that you anticipate anything's going to be solved in these debates, at least not right now, because you have so many of them up there fighting for attention. But again, credit to CNN and these candidates for sticking to the rules. And I think it was actually a pretty healthy debate. Now, I don't agree with most of anything these people are saying, but I try to watch these debates from the perspective of a neutral mind, or even somebody who says, well, maybe from a Democratic lens, from somebody who's in the Democratic Party or somebody who's an independent or this, that, or the other, and just sort of listen. Does it make sense? What's going on here? So a few things that I want to talk about here in regards to the debate are health care policy. That was front and center. Student debt forgiveness. That took up a good amount of time. And then, should the United States be the policeman of the world? These are all good topics. These are all going to be front and center throughout the entirety of this campaign season. What was also interesting that was not noted during this debate, and I was very thankful for it, there was no calls for impeachment. There were no calls for endless investigations. There was no real great discussion, if any, of the Bob Mueller investigation and what's taking place in Congress right now with all these endless investigations. So at least we didn't have to waste our time hearing more of that nonsense for the time being. Now, we'll see what happens tomorrow evening, but at least tonight, we dodged that bullet. Hopefully tomorrow night we dodge the bullet again, because we have some real issues that need to be discussed, and the American people need to hear more from these candidates. That is our process here in the United States. Whether you have nothing in common with these candidates, whether you're a diehard Trump fan, you need to listen. This is our system. This is our democracy. This is our republic. So, on the health care front and center, in the center of the stage, were Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. They're the center of the stage because they are, amongst these 10 candidates, they have the highest polling numbers. Okay. They are both advocating for Medicare for all. They want the entire private insurance industry gone, wiped off the face of the planet, or at least wiped off the map in the United States of America. You have several other candidates who are saying, we're for a public option, but you have to give Americans a choice, because a lot of Americans like their private insurance. They like receiving it through their employer. They like receiving it through their union. And you can't take it away from them because they like it. What's the solution here? The solution is free market capitalism. The problem is we don't have free market capitalism. The problem is we have too many regulators who have been captured by industry. So when these Democrats make the point that there's too much corporate money in the system, in our politics, that's absolutely true. I can't deny that. We talk about this in our book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing. We do a whole chapter analysis on this with lobbying. It's one of my favorite chapters. It's fascinating how much money is spent per member of Congress. How many lobbyists exist per member of Congress. That book was published a few years ago. It's only going to get worse, ladies and gentlemen. It's only going to get worse. So you have to give credit to the Democrats to call that out. The problem, however, that these Democrats have is they just blame big business, as if Congress has nothing to do with it, as if government has nothing to do with it. That's ridiculous. It takes two to tango. These major corporations can knock on the door, ring the bell all day long. Doesn't mean you got to let them in. So if these government officials, if these congressmen and women and senators are going to let these businesses in and then listen to them, there you go, folks. It takes two to tango. It's the problem on both sides. You want the solution? End the Federal Reserve and abolish the federal income tax. Starve the beast. You can't give them what they don't have. These businesses lobby Congress because they want the money. If Congress doesn't have the money, they can't give it to them. You see how simple this is? You see why I talk here every day in the Federal Reserve? Abolish the federal income tax? You want a pay raise? How much you pay in federal income tax? There you go. It's in your pocket. How much does the Federal Reserve inflate and erode your purchasing power every year? There you go. It's in your pocket. Now you're going to have a free market capitalistic system. Now you're going to unleash American entrepreneurs and innovators. Now you're going to have better products, more products, at a better cost, meaning a lower cost. So put that savings in your pocket. I just made you a rich person overnight. Boom, like that. Why? Because you truly drain the swamp when you do that. Talking about devaluing the dollar and glorifying the military-industrial complex. No, that's a bunch of nonsense. Littering cabinet with members from the military-industrial complex and from Wall Street, it's a joke. It's a joke. We're not draining the swamp. We haven't even drained the kiddie pool. And what these Democrats are proposing is just going to make the swamp even worse. It's quite ironic, especially when you have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. They rail against big corporations. They rail against any company that gets close to resembling a monopoly or having some sort of monopolistic power. However, they think they're smart enough to run 16% of this or 18% of this country's economy, which is what we spend on healthcare. That's a monopoly, folks. They want private insurers. They want competition gone. They want a monopoly in healthcare. They rail against it from the private sector, but if they're in charge, everything's A-OK. The other thing that gets me going, and we've written articles on this, so check them out on thecapitalnews.com, healthcare is not a right. Bernie Sanders and others want to say that healthcare is a right. And somehow they want to make that statement, but they also want to say if it's a right, then therefore Congress has to pay for it. Well, what's our argument to that, folks? Let's look at the Bill of Rights, shall we? Let's just look at the couple first amendments. Let's look at the right to free speech. You have a right to free speech. I don't think there's anybody in this country who's going to deny that. Right, left, black, white, up, down, makes no difference. People agree with that. They defend to free speech. Does that mean I get to go to a government building and say, hey, I want to protest in Washington, D.C., or I want to protest at my state capitol? Give me a check so I can go buy a whole bunch of signs? Give me money so I can go buy a whole bunch of signs so I can protest the government? Is that how that works? No, it doesn't work like that. Rights don't equate to the government writing you a check. What about the Second Amendment? You have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to bear arms. Now, this might be a little bit more contentious in the political scene, but nevertheless, it is an amendment. It does exist. It is called a right here in this country. Does that mean you get to go down to your government office and say, hey, I want to go buy a .45 and a couple shotguns, and I'm going to need some ammunition too. Give me a check. Give me some cash. Is that how that works? No, it doesn't work like that because that's not how it works. You don't get to say something's a right and then therefore it automatically means that the government's going to write you a check for it. Furthermore, you do not have the right to somebody's labor. You walk into a hospital, you are receiving the labor of a doctor, of a nurse, of technicians, and a whole slew of other people. You don't have a right to their labor. Plain and simple. They might take an oath to not do harm to people, and that's fantastic, but you don't have a right to their labor. You just don't. It's not how it works. The other thing that these Democrats were talking about, because some of them are trying to be a little bit more center of the road, trying to put the best solutions together and compromise a little bit here, and they're talking about the public option. You're going to have a public option, which simply means you can buy in to the government-run health insurance program, or you can continue to have your private insurance. The choice is up to you. Remember, the Democrats are supposed to be the party of choice. Yet crazy Bernie and Pocahontas want to remove that choice when it comes to health care. But nevertheless, you have what's called the public option and private insurance. The problem is with this, folks, is that the public option will eventually crowd out private insurance because it's very difficult to compete with the government. Why is it very difficult to compete with the government? Because the government has the power to tax, fine, put liens against you, throw you in prison. They have the Federal Reserve to print as much money as they want printed. They can go into debt up to their eyeballs, which we continue to do. Corporations can't do that. You can rail against corporations all day long. People who are against Walmart or other big corporations, guess what? You don't have to walk into Walmart and buy their goods. You don't have to do it. Walmart can't force you to do it. And if you don't do it, Walmart can't come to your house and arrest you. They can't fine you. They can't tax you. But guess who can? The government. So if you have this public option, it's just a matter of time before it crowds out private insurance. Makes sense, doesn't it? The other problem, there's just a whole slew of problems. They don't want to be honest about this either. That's saying that the public option is going to crowd out. I do think, if I recall from the first debate a couple weeks or whatever it was, a month ago already, I think there was one candidate, and it might have been Kirsten Gillibrand, who said she actually wanted the public option because she wants it to crowd out private insurance. She wants it to go that way. So at least she was somewhat honest about it. Now, she was completely stupid saying that out loud, but at least she was honest about it. She's going to be debating tomorrow. I don't want to hear this woman at all, but I'm going to listen to her. Hopefully they don't give her that much time, but we'll hear what they all have to say tomorrow. So that's healthcare. Now, there's a whole other things we can talk about. Again, check out our commentary and our articles on thecapitalnews.com. This is going to be front and center throughout the entirety of this election, so there's going to be a lot more points that we're talking about here. And this is going to be reiterated because people have to understand this. This is not right. And again, do you want this to be a political football? Because if these Democrats win and they somehow pass this health care, public option, Medicare for all, do you think that's going to stay in this country forever? What happened? Do you think that a Republican will never win again the presidency? Do you think Republicans will never regain the House and the Senate and want to repeal this? Why do you want your life a mess because of a whole bunch of idiots who think they know better? This makes no sense to me whatsoever. That's why this country was founded, to get away from this stuff. And here we are right back where we came from because we don't pay attention to our founders. We don't read the Declaration of Independence. We don't read the Constitution. We don't understand it. We don't read the Federalist Papers. We don't read the Anti-Federalist Papers. We don't understand our history. We don't understand the history of the world. That's why history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And that's where we are right here, front and center. And we are trying, and right now you got a party, a major political party, that is advocating for policies that are going to destroy this country, which have been destroying this country. And this is true on both sides of the aisle. Now, to the discussion of student debt. We've also talked about this on previous podcasts. A lot of this is debt forgiveness. You have Mayor Buttigieg saying, we have a lot of student debt, him personally. But you know what? I am not for debt forgiveness. So I have to applaud Mayor Buttigieg on this. Of course, crazy Bernie Sanders. Oh, yeah, there's got to be a complete student loan debt cancellation. Complete. No problem. $1.5 trillion. We're just going to forgive it. It's all on the back of the government, guaranteed by the government. Yeah, we'll just eat another $1.5 trillion. Let's just add that to the national debt. No problem whatsoever. This is all wrong. What kind of moral hazard does this create? And this was what Mayor Buttigieg was talking about, basically. And it's a fantastic point. What type of moral hazard will this cause? Will it cause people to go out and take more loans before, if they think one of these Democrats are going to win? Because, well, hey, I might as well just run the credit card up, max it out, because I'm going to be forgiven once Pocahontas or Crazy Bernie get in there. It's ridiculous. What about the people who've done the right things? What about the people who said, you know what, I'm going to take on a second job so I can pay off my student loans? What about the people who say, you know what, I'm not going to go out on the weekend. Instead, I'm going to save some money? What about the people who don't take a vacation because they need to save money to pay off their student loans? What about all those people who have done the right things, who have done the prudent things, or who have given up on some other opportunities to save money to pay their student loans back? Are these people going to be rewarded with a check? Are they going to get a refund? And how far back are you going to go, Bernie? I mean, these are serious questions. Does he even contemplate these things? Does he even care? That's a serious question. So that's student debt. I don't think it's any easier than that, because you're going to have people rioting. If you think you're going to have people rioting because they can't pay them back, what about the people who did the right thing and said, I'm getting tired of getting screwed from every which way. I got to bail out the banks. I got to bail out these people. I got to bail out everybody. Those are going to be the people. That's the silent majority in this country. And you're going to see one hell of a riot if you do have some sort of debt cancellation, because you have completely ignored these people. I'm not advocating that you pay them back. I'm just saying if you're going to have debt forgiveness, then you have to give the people who did the right thing some money too. I'm completely against bailouts. I don't want to bail out Wall Street, but we did it. And now you have what happens to actually be a logical argument. It's not a good one, but it's still logical. It makes sense. It appeals to a lot of people, that you have Democrats who say, well, look, if you could bail out Wall Street, who screwed the system, then why can't you bail out students? Why can't you bail out Main Street? Again, that's logical. That's appealing. Economically, mathematically, it's terrible. Moral hazard it creates, huge. So it's not a solution. It's just politics. It's just hot air. No real solutions. And then lastly, policemen of the world, something else that we talk about here constantly at the Kapital News. The military-industrial complex is alive and well. Very much alive and well. We have our Secretary of Defense, an executive from Raytheon. The former acting Secretary of Defense was from Boeing. Nikki Haley, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, I think she's now working at Boeing, sitting on the board. It's a revolving door. Again, this showdown between the policemen of the world went down to, really wasn't a showdown, actually. It was more of an agreement between Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders that the United States should not be the policemen of the world. And I agree with this 100%. We don't have the money. We should not be risking our life and blood for being the policemen of the world. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's not in our Constitution, by the way. So where are we getting the authority to do so? Just because we want to do it? What kind of blowback, what kind of problems does this cause around the world when we start interfering in other people's countries, their affairs, their elections? Oh, wait, the Russians, we can't even talk about Russia messing with us, or it's a huge problem, but we can go all over the world, covertly and overtly interfere with elections, attempt to stage coups, again, covertly and overtly, especially in Venezuela, and it's not a problem. But if another country messes with us, all hell breaks loose. I'm not for other countries messing with our elections, not for a second. But you notice the hypocrisy, the double standard? We shouldn't be doing it either. So those are the 3 points that I thought were worth mentioning here today. The discussion on health care, student debt forgiveness, and policemen of the world. Because these are all interconnected in one way or the other. Now, there wasn't much discussion, and again, that's probably just simply due to time, the amount of people up there on the stage. But they were sort of alluding to it, that we have to be more aware of the healthcare story. That it's not just about insurance and paying bills, but are we getting involved in activities and actions and behaviors that make us as individuals healthy? Or are we simply talking about sick care, not health care, but sick care, disease care? What are we putting into our bodies? Do we exercise? No, we don't. We don't eat very well here in the United States of America. We don't exercise to the extent that we should here in the United States of America. And guess what? We talk about this in the Cynic's Guide to Investing, Trends and Demographics. It's all connected, folks. You have to understand it. And that's what we do in our book. We tie it all together. And we don't just talk about it. We give you a plan. We give you a layout. How to evaluate companies. How to understand where the economy is likely going. How to capitalize on these movements in demographics and in trends. What businesses are connected? Which ones are joined at the hip with the government? Who's likely to get bailed out? Who's likely to be awarded major contracts? You have to pay attention to everything. It's all connected. So stay tuned to the Kapital News. We're going to be back here tomorrow night following round 2 of the Democrats' debate. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I know I did, because these are pressing issues. Pay attention tomorrow. We have the Federal Reserve out as well. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the Kapital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.